Right, I'm with Cyril Vibert, who's become quite well known in the Magistrates' Court, primarily about challenging parking tickets. But it's more to it than that, Cyril. What's it all about?
Well, originally it started because I literally forgot to put a pay card up. That was in Pereon car park. There was 6 stories of empty levels, not a car parked anywhere, and I was late for an appointment. Forgot to put the parking card up, and when I came back I saw that 7 or 8 minutes after I'd left the car that a ticket had been put on. I spoke to TTS about it, told them it was a genuine mistake, but they weren't interested. I think I went to the parish hall and they told me that it was a criminal offence. Now that shocked me, because I'd always believed that to commit a crime you need to hurt somebody or harm somebody, and this was obviously harming no one.
Obviously one of the elements usually of a criminal offence is there has to be a criminal intent. That's one of the elements. Obviously,
that's right.
If you simply forget to do something, it hardly amounts to a criminal activity, does it?
Well, there's a very well known legal definition of crime. It's called corpus delicti. It has 2 parts, 2 elements, and both elements are required for there to be anything to be categorised as a crime. The first element is the causation of injury, harm or loss, and the second element is intent, as you said. And obviously I'd forgotten there was no intent and there was no injury, harm or loss to anybody, so I couldn't figure out how this could possibly be a criminal offence if I was to challenge it. But it is in Jersey. It's a criminal offence.
Is it that the government authorities, whatever, they assume a responsibility, they assume the role as the aggrieved party? Is that what they're doing?
That would be a tort. You're talking of tort, and there is no tort, because there's no harm or loss to anybody, not the state or anybody else. The more I looked into these things, into the parking fines, and started studying the law, the more I realised that this is just a revenue generation technique. It has no lawfulness to it at all. It's very easy to understand how unlawful it is, because we actually own the roads and the car parks.
Well, it has become, not just in Jersey, generally UK especially, a money earner to sort of pursue the motorists for any offences that they can pin on them.
Yeah, most of the statutes written these days are revenue generating devices. They've got nothing to do with crime and punishment or law and order. I mean, Guernsey doesn't charge to park on the side of the road, but we do, and it's a multi-million pound a year scam, I call it.
As far as you're concerned, I attended in court last week and you had, I think there were 7, 8 offences, parking offences, so it's not...
5 of them.
5, was it?
Yeah.
It's not just forgetfulness anymore, it's become more than that.
No, now I refuse to pay to park in a parking spot.
Right.
I don't park to cause anybody any trouble. I park in community standards. I'll park in a proper parking spot,
right,
but I won't pay for it.
The outcome of that hearing was the magistrate, I thought, was being quite tolerant in listening to what you had to say, but you did leave before the prosecution case was presented.
Yeah.
What was the purpose of that?
I left because I was refused my rights, specifically the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 6, 3A, where you have to be informed of the detail of the nature and cause of the charges and accusations against you, and they won't do that in a Jersey court.
They did subsequently bring details of all the current offences, alleged offences. Then the witnesses came along, traffic wardens and all the rest of the police officers came along and presented details.
That's the evidence. It's not the nature and cause.
No.
Yeah, the nature and cause goes right to the fact. There's several elements you need to have a charge. One is jurisdiction, obviously. Another one is a valid cause of action, which is usually a complaint from somebody against somebody else. And the other is standing, the ability that you have to stand up in a court and say something. Unfortunately, Jersey courts are de facto. There's no de jure courts in Jersey, so people are considered to be not people. They're considered to be either admiralty property or part of commerce, and we're not. where people who stand on the land, and we are part of the law of the land.
Why do you say Admiralty property? Because obviously Admiralty is to do with the sea, not on land.
Yeah, it's most of the statutory laws are laws of the sea, because most people don't understand there's the laws of the land, but there's also the laws of the sea. Everybody's heard of the laws of the land. A few people have heard of the laws of the sea, and they're maritime admiralty laws. They're merchant, they're lex mercantile, they're universal commercial code, and they deal with commerce and corporate affairs, and they should not be brought onto the land and criminalised to use against people.
Why do you think that's? I can't quite grasp why. Obviously, the court was a court of statutory law, I believe. The Jersey Magistrates Court.
Magistrates Court have got multi-jurisdictional abilities. They can hear cases in varied jurisdictions. A magistrate working under their oath of office is able to hear a case in common law. They very rarely do that. Mostly when there is a common law offence, it's too serious for them to do. They refuse jurisdiction and send it up to the Royal Court.
Well, again, I don't want to interrupt, but at the beginning of the hearing, the magistrate was very keen that you'd just been handed a judgment or an opinion. I think it was a judgment or an opinion.
Judgment.
It was a judgment that had come down, which had some rulings from the Royal Court.
Had some opinions.
Which were related to your pleadings, or whatever you pleaded.
Yeah, I mean,
and the magistrate was quite keen that you should adjourn and consider them.
Yeah, it was a 13-page document, and it was given to me half an hour before the proceedings were due to take place. It was from the Deputy Bailiff, William Baloche. It was a judgment with a lot of legal opinions in it. I will be doing a blog entry about this at some point and publishing it, and with a commentary underneath. I will be making a response to the Deputy Bailiff about his judgment.
That was in response to what? That was another similar case?
That was in response to an appeal against conviction for unparking offences.
Is that the offence where you were done for contempt? Or was that another one?
No. I was imprisoned for contempt,
right,
for 3 cases of contempt. One for walking out of the court when Mrs. Shaw wouldn't confirm her oath of office. I can't remember offhand what the other 2 things were, but they were what most people would consider to be not contempt of court. There was no swearing. I didn't attack anybody. I didn't cause disruption. I stood my ground and asked questions, and they really don't like that in a magistrate's court.
Just for the purposes of this interview, the result of that was you did spend a couple of days at Lemoyne, didn't you?
Yes, Richard Fall, Uber crook Richard Fall, decided to not bother with a trial for contempt of court, just to send me straight to prison. So I spent 2 days in K-Wing up at Lemoyne Prison. Now,
the magistrate, when I observed you last week, as I say, she seemed to be reasonably tolerant. Would you say that was reflecting a different attitude from the court towards you? Because you left the court and they didn't say you shouldn't. They didn't say.
Well, I asked her if I was free to go. At first, she wasn't keen for me to go, but when I asked her if I was being detained, she pretty much said no, so I asked her if I was free to go. She said that she would carry on with the proceedings without me. I didn't consent to that, but I asked her if I was free to go again, and she said yes, so I left.
Well, the proceedings did go on, and they heard the prosecution cases for what they were. The various traffic wardens and so on came and presented their case, and at the end she gave a decision, and she passed what she thought was an appropriate sentence, which was a £500 fine. I don't know what happened about costs, which is what the prosecuting advocate asked for, £500 fine, as far as I can make out. And you're to return to the court in a few weeks' time, next week, I think.
Allegedly, I'm due to appear on the 24th or 25th, I think it is. Unfortunately, I haven't had an unlawful order asking me to appear. I haven't had a court document signed by a magistrate under her oath of office for me to appear. I've had a couple of commercial pieces of paper sent to me, which I'm going to ignore.
One of the outcomes which you wouldn't have heard, and I heard because I was sitting there, was that the magistrate was very critical of the State's police and their handling of the interviews they carried out with you. They knocked on your door unannounced at your home on 2 occasions, I think, and proceeded to ask you for details of things that had happened on such and such a day. And the magistrate seemed to think that was probably unlawful, because it was supposed to be constables or the centeneers were supposed to carry out that job, and she was very critical, surprisingly critical, of the fact that they had given you a caution and invited you to say things, and their procedures sounded very unprofessional for a professional police force. You wouldn't have heard all that, but does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me that she criticised somebody whilst you were taking notes. No, it doesn't surprise me at all. It would have surprised me if she'd have done that with nobody in the court. Her points relate to a previous trial I had where I did stay and question the witnesses, the police included, and did ask them about the procedures that they'd taken and how they'd approached things. And from that, a complaint of perjury has been lodged by myself against the two police officers that came that time. It's actually being considered by Tim Lecoq at the minute, the AG, as to whether he's going to take any action or not, after a secret investigation into the matter, which I wasn't privy to be at or hear about. Yeah, when the police come to you to ask you questions, they're meant to caution you. Yeah, and the caution says you have the right to remain silent.
Well, the curious thing she was saying that they should contact you beforehand, saying they're intended to come and talk to you about a specific matter. That would be so that you can prepare. You can be prepared to have the information available.
Yeah. I mean, they turn up at whatever time they turn up, and they catch you cold. There's always two of them. There's one of you. It's not a very good procedure.
I mean, it struck me that she was saying those things, which were quite strong things, and have got a very wide application. Lots of people must get the policeman turning up on their door and demanding to know information, and they've just got out the bath or something, not thinking about it.
Nobody's under any obligation to speak to a policeman at all, even when you're arrested. You are under no obligation to talk to him. You're under no obligation to give him your name or anything, any detail about you. They can arrest you and take you down the station. You're still not obliged to say anything.
Well, of course, that was exactly the issue. Part of the charge for the state's police was that you were refusing to give information.
Yes.
And of course she said, well, I'm not going to go along with that because that's not valid.
Yeah, one of the laws that in the road traffic law, I think it's Article 86, seems to say that people have to give information when asked to by the constable or a representative of the constable centeneer. Now that is an unlawful statute because we have the absolute inalienable right to remain silent, and any law that's trying to criminalise our right is an unlawful piece of legislation. It needs to be struck out automatically, and it's the reason why the police ask you that question before they give you the caution, because they'd look a bit stupid if they was to say you have the right to remain silent.
Obviously the challenges you're bringing have implications way beyond parking offences. They are much more serious. I mean, it would be very fundamental to the operation of the judicial legal system.
Absolutely.
If your arguments were proved to be correct.
Absolutely.
Do you think perhaps Jersey lawyers ought to take more notice of what you're doing? Or do you think?
I think we need to have a proper judicial system. I think we need to have a system of justice rather than a legal system. The truth of the matter is lawyers run this island. The bailiff can tell a politician what questions he can and can't ask. They absolutely, in practice and in theory, run this island, and that's not right. Elected politicians should be the people who run this island.
Well, of course, the system has taken a substantial knock recently with the jailing of the senior magistrate. Mm-hmm. So that ought to have some implication for people to be looking at that side of the legal service.
I think there's a lot of things have happened in the last few years that cast serious questions about our judiciary and how it operates, and how the power of the judiciary is all-encompassing and literally can override anything that our elected members want to do or say. This is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. So yes, my challenges in parking tickets at the minute do have a much more fundamental objective beneath them, and I chose parking tickets because it was the one that came up naturally. I don't break the law. I'm a law-abiding man. I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to steal from anybody. I don't want to commit fraud in my contracts or anything like that. So the parking ticket came up, and it became the way I could start to study the legal system in Jersey, the actual operation of the legal system in Jersey. Obviously, I studied LSATs to learn how to read statute, and done a lot of research into the operation of the law.
If the fine which was to be imposed was £500, if you don't pay that, presumably you will have the threat of a prison term over you.
Yeah.
And you're not happy, presumably, about that, but...
No, I'd prefer not to go to prison, but I won't be paying any fine. So, you know, there is other...
Because it's rather ironic, because again, the magistrate, in fairness to her, did set out by saying that parking offences are not imprisonable offences.
That's right.
But of course, it's a bit ironic that it's failing to pay the fine if you finish up doing prison sentence, which is... the result is it becomes an imprisonable offence, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's bending of the interpretation, and we've got to remember that a lot of even what's written as statute, which our states members pass, is written in legalese. Very few states members can understand legalese, and a lawyer will actually lie about legalese. They'll tell you that certain words mean something when they don't, and you can look them up in law dictionaries and find out. Almost everything that happens in local courts, apart from the real common law stuff like murder and things like that, are based on legislation that's written in legalese by lawyers, and they get to interpret that. You've got no chance. You really have got no chance.
Well, we better end now because the clock's ticking on my little recorder, but
okay, thank you.
We shall watch with interest what happens.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yes.